Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Skating Penguin Network Mailbag. I am Garrett Bahana. I am joined by my two co-hosts. Snail and Robbie is back this week after dealing with some sickness. He had caught the Rona. Robbie, I don't know if that's the first time you caught the Rona. I've caught it a couple of times since the pandemic, but it is no fun to go through it. I can assure you, and I'm sure Robbie would attest to it, but he is here. They have the technology and they rebuilt Robbie from the ground up, and he is ready to answer more of your questions. And well, with that said, Robbie, like always, you'll get question number one. All 15 of these questions in part one of this mailbag come from Brian. So as Brian is delivering the holiday mail, all of these questions that he will be listening to come from him. Robbie, like always, you get question number one. Snail gets question two. I get number three, and we go from there. Let's kick it off. Brian is here. Question one. What's a good place in the city, meaning Pittsburgh, to go try Indian food? You guys have been talking about it for a while, and now Brian wants to try some. Robbie, I can't remember. Are you an Indian food fan? Because I know I am, but.
Yeah, so I love Indian food. I've never actually tried it in Pittsburgh, though. I usually just get it just never in Pittsburgh. We have a couple spots here in Johnstown that have some good options, but I do love Indian food. It is fantastic. It's the perfect mix of spices, proteins, vegetables, sauces, basically everything. So, Garrett, you might have better recommendations than I, but if you can get good Indian food wherever you're at, highly recommend.
I'm trying to think. The places that I've gotten Indian from, I honestly can't even remember the name. I think there's the one that I can remember. I was on Penn Avenue. I think it was called Taste of India. If you're ever along Penn Avenue in the, I don't know if Penn Avenue is technically the city, but I know it's on like the outskirts of downtown. So, but I mean, if you just do a quick Google search, you'd be surprised to see there's quite a few popular Indian restaurants in and around the city. Some of the Indian food that I've gotten from the South Hills has been pretty good as well. But yeah, I'll go with Robbie there. I will also give my 2 thumbs up to Indian cuisine.
Yeah, you heard it here. Indian cuisine, Penscast recommended. Question number two. This one's going to Snail here. Any big standouts on or left off the United States roster for the World Juniors, or anyone you're looking forward to watching for the United States?
Well, upon research here, I realized that it was for the USA, and most of the guys I had listed here were actually Canadian. So, but I have one for you here. This guy made the US roster, and this has been a prospect that I've kept an eye on for a couple of years. He's actually in Erie, playing for the Erie Otters of the OHL. And that's Kerry Terrence. Kerry Terrence from Akwesasne. He's a indigenous hockey player. He's lighting it up right now. He's got 28 games played. He's got 22 goals, 12 assists, 34 points, 14 PIMs. He's a +9. I saw he made that roster. Very happy for him, and stoked to see what he brings to. He's a prospect of the Ducks. I should mention he's not out there ripe for the pickings for other teams, but he's a prospect for the Anaheim Ducks, who someday they're going to be completely stacked and loaded. But curious to see how he lines up against his peers and fellow future NHLers. I'm super excited for the World Juniors. Feels like this is going to be the first year we'll have kind of like a normal reset, good World Juniors, not affected by the by COVID and all that. You guys like to watch the World Juniors? Either of you?
Yeah, especially since it occurs over the holidays, when you have downtime, more or less fun to turn it on. And again, not the prettiest hockey, but it's fast, a lot of scoring usually, and especially this year we have Braden Yeager for the Penguins to watch, and that'll make it just worth tuning in just to start. But yeah, I do generally turn it on just because it's hockey and exciting to watch, and just a different type of game.
Well, yeah, and like Robbie, I know you for sure. I can't remember if Garrett's ever stated on here whether he was into it or not, but you have an appreciation for like college football, right?
Yeah, I love college football.
So it's kind of like this. I would say it's sort of a similar vibe. It's definitely a little bit. It's not the most fine-tuned product on the ice, but that typically makes for quite a bit of excitement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it's a good. I love the World Juniors, and COVID has kind of put a dampener on it the last couple of years. You know, you don't from when it was postponed, you had players not playing.
Yeah.
It kind of messed up what am I trying to say here? Kind of like some of these players were supposed to be big draft picks, but then they lost a couple of years. It didn't have the same sort of shine to it, but this year I feel like it's finally reset, and we kind of have like we'll be Canada's stacked, US is stacked. I'm hyped for it. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Brian, keep an eye out for this Kerry Terrence. He's going to be a player one day, and going to be looking to see him represent US. Question number 3 here, going to Garrett. Did you ever notice that? Oh God. Did you ever notice that fingers have fingertips, but toes don't have toe tips, but you can tiptoe, but not tip finger?
You know, you get a little bit of everything here. This isn't just strictly Penguins hockey talk. We are trying to figure out why fingertips are called fingertips. What's the tip of the toe called again? I mean, you can tiptoe, obviously, as Brian says, but what, like, obviously it's called a fingertip. What is the toe equivalent of that? Does anyone know? Getting shaking heads from both of my co-hosts. So, okay, I mean, this is a very open-ended kind of question, and not one that we need to linger too long on, but I mean, he makes some good points. Like, you can tiptoe, you can't tip finger.
All right, I got something for you. Sorry to interrupt, Garrett.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's see. The distal phalangeal joint, the DP, it was found near the tip of the toe.
We're not gonna let that chuckle you just let out when you said DP slide. Okay, I am going to make sure that we put emphasis on that.
Okay.
Well, everyone loves the DP around here.
Yeah, I got it. It's just like this question would go there, like talking about fingers and toes and DPs, but it's the distal phalangeal joint, Brian.
I remember when I was in my freshman year of high school, I had to take a required health class, and we spent an entire 40-minute period talking about the phalanges and like the intricacies and the tiny bones that make up the fingers and your knuckles and all that fun stuff. So I hadn't heard the word phalange or a variation on that word in quite a while, so I had to bring that up. But it is an open-ended question that perhaps will elude us until the end of time as we move to question 4. Back to Robbie, back to hockey here. Robbie, do you see Sidney Crosby getting any consideration for the Hart Trophy at season's end?
It all is going to depend on what the Penguins end up doing. I think if the Penguins make the playoffs, then I think he's probably very much in that conversation again. And it also depends on what the other big guns around the league do. Right now, McDavid is on an absolute torching streak of games. Again, will depend on what the Oilers end up doing there as well. It just, man, unless he puts up over 100 points, I think it's going to be really hard to compete with some of the high-end guys, but I guess we'll wait and see here what happens. I think he'll be in the conversation if the Penguins make the playoffs. Whether or not that is enough to simply get him into even a finalist, final 3 kind of situation, I can't say for sure, but I think it really will all depend on what the Penguins do in the second half of the season. Can they make the playoffs? What does he carry the team if he goes and puts up 110 points somehow, or scores 50 goals, even 100 points, 50 goals, maybe we're talking MVP. but I really think it's going to be more of a what do the Penguins do as a team. But again, Crosby's 36 now. Maybe he gets the lifetime achievement award kind of treatment that you'll see sometimes if he posts numbers like that and the Penguins make the playoffs or right there at the bubble till the very end. So I think there's definitely going to be a conversation surrounding it. It will just depend on what the trajectory of the Penguin season is after the season. Question number 5 here, shooting this over to Snail here. Say you got to start a franchise with any player, who would you choose? I think I'd have to say one of the Kachucks and nearly have to go with Matthew over Brady.
Well, let's see here. If I was going to start a franchise with any player, who would I choose? I mean, right now it's hard to not go with a Cale Makar. I think just a right shot D-man who just wheels around out there, but he's kind of sneaky tough. He's durable. And I like the way you're thinking, Brian, with the Kachucks. I don't think you could go wrong with either of them, but I'm picking Brady over a Matthew because, I mean, that Brady is a leader. He is a captain, he's a purebred captain. I believe he's a centerman too. If I'm wrong, you guys could correct me, but Matthew's a winger. If I was starting a franchise, I'd be weary to start with a winger because you kind of need the centerman to make the winger really pop or whatever. I think a right shot D-man who can just run a power play and is defensively sound, I'd pick that over a centerman because those just don't grow on trees. Those are even more rare. So it's hard not to go with an obvious choice of a Cale Makar, a guy like a Victor Hedman coming up in his younger days. It'd be hard not to look at him and think that guy could be a stalwart on my D-core for 15 years. To your point, Brian, again, I'm going Brady over Matthew because I think if you're starting a franchise, you're going to be garbage for quite a while until you truly get enough draft picks and can become relevant. You need a guy like Brady, I think, in there. Just a big, strong pain in the ass to play against. He seems like a great team guy. He's got great character. He'll keep your team accountable through the doldrums of a budding franchise. I'm going with a guy like Brady, given the two choices you kind of gave me there. But other than that, you got to go for a Cale, a Hedman, a Carlson, even something like that. So those are the guys I'm going for. And with that, we'll move here to question number 6, going over to Garrett. Brian asks, what does everyone think of Puustinen? I like what I see from him mostly. Do you think he should stay up with the big club once we get healthy?
I think out of everyone that they've tried to recall, and between your Nylander, your Puustinen, guys on the back end, I just saw they waived Ryan Shea, Jansen Harkins. I think they sent him back down again. Out of all of them, Puustinen looks like he has the best chance to maybe earn a permanent spot. I mean, look, the sample size right off the bat, you have to say the sample size is incredibly small. 5 career games, 4 of those games coming this season with only 2 assists to his name. The possession stats are in his favor. Corsi for percentage of 55.6. Or that was in 2021-22. 23-24, a Corsi for percentage of 56.1. Fenwick for percentage of 53.7. So he looks like he could be a pretty decent player. Again, these are incredibly, incredibly limited samples. It looks like, though, he has found some sort of juice or some sort of connection when he was on the power play, but I don't think he will be in the top 6 permanently. It looks like Rickard Rakell could be coming back, and it looks like he will be slotted alongside Sidney Crosby, which I am all for. When Brian Rust is back fully healthy, ready to go, he will probably slot on that line right next to Evgeny Malkin. Puustinen, I think, could definitely fight and earn a bottom 6 role permanently, but it's kind of sad, isn't it, when you look at the state of the Penguins prospect cupboard and this. I think Valtteri Puustinen was a 7th round pick in 2019. When a 7th round pick is really one of the only things you can hang your hat on in terms of prospect development. Now I get it. The Penguins have been trading away their meaningful draft picks for years, and I wouldn't change a thing. But I mean, yeah, that just goes to show you Kyle Dubas and Mike Sullivan have been trying to pull out all of the stops that they can, calling guys up, calling guys down, putting them in, pulling them out of the lineup to see if anything clicks. And Puustinen may be one of those players, one of those few players that, may earn a permanent spot as the season goes along.
I don't want to sound too pessimistic here, but I'm so over the bending over backwards, trying to do these gymnastics to make these depth players seem like they're like we did it with Nylander. We're doing it with Puustinen. We've been doing it all season long, looking at the Corsi, trying to really find these like little gem stats that make it seem like these players might be promising in like a very small sample size. Puustinen, like you said, I think he's filling a void right now that's like it's decent. I mean, you can't really ask for a whole lot more from, like you said, a 7th round draft pick. But I'm just so over with the depth thing with these just, you've called them, Garrett, you've called them just guys before, and I didn't know totally what you meant. I get it now. They're just guys, and
that's the thing. You're right, because I think there's a portion of every fan base across the league that overvalues their young players in their farm system. Like, you look at Sam Poulin, who outside of Owen Pickering and Braden Yeager was the last first-round pick the Penguins had in a long time. Right. And Sam Poulin, take the personal issues that he was dealing with last season out of the equation. He even now doesn't look like he could amount to much of anything, maybe besides a bottom 6 player. That is not what you want out of a first-round pick. And I mean, look, you're not going to hit a home run on every first-round pick you get either. So every fan base has a tendency to put too much stock into players that are like younger than 25, because we're so used to the grizzled veterans like Ovechkin, Crosby, and Malkin who have been here on the scene for so long, and everyone wants the new next big thing. And for the Penguins, they don't really have that right now. Pickering and Yeager are the two most promising prospects they have, and neither of them are ready for NHL action in the near future. So I agree with you, Snail. I know exactly what you were saying. A lot of these guys that the Penguins have called up and probably will continue to call up are just bodies who can maybe play in a pinch, but for the most part are not regular NHL players.
I think another thing too with this franchise, and I see a little bit of it on Twitter, and I think that maybe we've gotten a little bit spoiled, because at times when you have a player like Sidney Crosby, you can call up somebody that an undrafted player like a Connor Sheary, and he'll score 25 goals on Sid's wing, or a third rounder in Gensel who turns out to be a star in the league. I think that maybe this franchise is kind of like, Puustinen's had like pedestrian numbers maybe down in wherever he was playing in the AHL. Maybe if you put him on a Gino or a Sid's wing, maybe all of a sudden he turns into a like another Brian Rust or a Sheary. But I think that those ships have sailed, and it's very slim pickings. So I'll be done being pessimistic for the moment. But yeah, I just see it a lot, and it's like, dude, I think at this point some of these players are pedestrian, and they just kind of are what they are.
Yeah, I agree. To wrap it up, yeah, that's a conversation for another day. We'll see if Puustinen gets that long-term look with the big club, and the Penguins would love nothing more, like you said, to develop another Brian Rust, Connor Sheary, Jake Gensel kind of player. I think Jake Gensel is head and shoulders above Connor Sheary and Brian Rust, in my opinion, and I think the stats reflect that. But the point remains that if they can get another quality long-term contributor, that would be great. That would be fantastic. But with only 5 NHL games to his belt, that is a definite wait and see and come to me again in the future. Question 7, as we go back to Robbie here. Brian says, maybe the key to this whole season is just to have the dad's trip be a full-time gig. They were, the power play found success, and they were winning outside of that stinker in Toronto with the dads cheering them on, Robbie.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that too. I mean, the dad's trip technically started last Tuesday with the Coyotes game, and everything kind of came alive, and then they sweep the back-to-back with Montreal the next night in a marathon shootout. Yeah, Saturday obviously not great, but the dads must have had some kind of magic, at least for a little bit, to get that power play going again, and maybe just get them like some cardboard cutouts or something that they can carry around with on the plane with them or something, because clearly there was some kind of magic going on there. But yeah, I mean, for once, everything looked good for 2 games, and that's just kind of what the Penguins are, though, I guess. It's you get those 2 games, and then you get a third that's just an absolute disaster, and we'll see what we get tonight with Minnesota, but just any consistency right now, whether you get it from a dad's trip or whatever, but it's frustrating, I guess, if as a Penguins fan, but hopefully they can get something going here as we get into Christmas, whether it's carrying over some of that magic or they just magically get better. I don't know. They are getting some healthy bodies, like you guys said. Ricard Raquel and Noel Achari coming back. Raquel, if you have forgotten, has 0 goals this season, as we are 7 days from Christmas. So maybe he can get one between now and then. But hey, let's just hope for some more consistency in these next few weeks here. Question number 8. This one's going back to Snell here. I think we need to get some of our overseas mates to watch Braden Yeager at the World Juniors.
Some of our overseas mates, as in some of our international listeners, like a Kim Larson, perhaps, or Garrett, help me out. Who are the other ones?
Kim Larson, I believe he is in Denmark. I believe
one of them's in Denmark.
And then we have Tony. I think Tony Gale is from England. I believe Edward Beckham, who has asked questions on here before, is also from England. And Andreas Castle has submitted questions before. I believe he is in Germany.
Wow. Okay. So, well, the World Juniors are in Gothenburg, Sweden. So I don't know which one of our listeners is within striking distance of hopping on maybe one of those sweet trains they have over there that just traverse through the various countries, or a short flight. That's not coming out. We don't have the I don't have the Pennsburg money that these guys have. So
yes,
maybe you'll have to we'll have to have Robbie and Garrett fund that, get them over there. Or I don't know, what about either you guys? Either you guys in a position to hop on a plane and go over to the World Juniors during the holidays?
No, unfortunately not.
I am in no position financially or emotionally to get on a plane and
Well, yeah, I don't think that's happening, Brian. I like the way you're thinking. Maybe, depending on how this podcast goes in the next year or so, maybe we'll be in a position at the next World Juniors. Fingers crossed. Let's see here. Question number 9. Garrett, Brian asks, who do you see as this franchise's greatest of all time? My answer has always been Mario without hesitation, but I'm starting to see Sid as him. Sid had concussion issues, injuries, medical issues, played a huge part in Mario's numbers. My final thoughts are Sid equals GOAT, Mario equals most important player to the franchise.
I like the way Brian put that at the end. Sidney Crosby being the GOAT and Mario being the most important, because I would probably agree with that. See, these kinds of questions are hard because so many different people are going to say, I judge this player. How do you judge, how do you judge the greatest of all time or most important player? Do you judge him by championships won? Well, Crosby has Lemieux beat. Do you judge him by all-time points? Well, right now, Lemieux has Crosby beat and will probably maybe have Crosby beat if and when he decides to hang it up. Who knows? When I was looking at this question, I often go to Hockey Reference to talk about possession stats or, stats from year to year. And they have a great tool in their miscellaneous tab. If you go to any player who has played in the NHL probably has a player card on Hockey Reference. They have a great column in their miscellaneous tab where it's called adjusted. And adjusted is, if I can pull it up here, now it's not going to say anything. Okay.
Is that, Garrett, is that the thing where you can take a player from an older generation and have their stats, what they would be now?
Yes. Okay.
That's awesome.
I found it. So adjusted points are on Hockey Reference, again, adjusted points are the adjusted stats that are normalized to an 82-game schedule, 18 skaters, and league averages of 6 goals a game and 1.67 assists per goal. So with all of that data presented to you, and this is more easily understood if you go on Hockey Reference's website instead of me trying to describe it. But in terms of adjusted points, so if Mario Lemieux, if we're adjusting his stats to an 82-game schedule, 18 skaters, league average of 6 goals a game and whatnot, his 1988-89 age 23 season adjusted, again, these are adjusted statistics, he would have scored 71 goals, 94 assists for 165 points. That is statistically his best adjusted season, his 1988-89 age 23 season. Again, 71 goals, 94 assists, 165 points. If we go to Sidney Crosby and look at his adjusted point totals, now Crosby has played in this era that we are all most familiar with, those of us talking on this podcast. His adjusted point totals, given all of the data that I presented, his best season would have been his age 19 season, 06-07, where, according to these adjusted totals, 38 goals, 84 assists, 122 adjusted points. So Lemieux has, 33, if I did the math right, 33 more points, adjusted points, than Sidney Crosby's best ever adjusted season. This is a long-winded answer to basically say, even with the difference in eras played, and even though the 80s and 90s were often more high scoring than it is today, Mario Lemieux far and away outclasses Sidney Crosby in terms of offensive production and points scored. And if you want to take it even a little further into a different part of the conversation, Mario Lemieux did that, accomplished all he had accomplished, being 6'4", 230 pounds. Now, I was not actively watching Lemieux. I was obviously not alive during his prime, but from those that I've talked to, and maybe Robbie can attest to some of this, and Snail too, because you are both older than me. But I remember my dad telling me that when you watched Mario Lemieux skate, when he caught his stride, he was like nothing you had ever seen before, because a guy with that size at 6'4", 230 should not be able to skate as fluently as he was able to do so. So I don't know if you guys want to speak to that at all, but again, any which way you want to take this argument, you could take it in 1,000 different directions. But if you want to talk about points, it looks like Mario Lemieux may still have that edge over Sidney Crosby.
I think that this is to each their own. I think you could make an argument that Sid might be the most important player to the franchise. You could take that argument because of where the team was at prior to him being drafted. Mario was in the twilight end of his career, and Sid was the golden goose that helped put asses in seats. Dude, Mario, it's hard not to say he's the GOAT. If you, with the adjusted stats, or if he was healthy argument, we're talking this guy we might be seeing 66s up in rafters as opposed to 99s. And that's debatable. I think some people might come for my head saying that, but if you look at the statistics and the numbers being put up, and you take away the injuries and the cancer and all that, the back problems, he wasn't able to lace his own skates. If you had a fully healthy Mario, that could very well be the case. So this is one of those things we could argue about this over beers until the sun came up in the morning. But I feel like I would almost have them switched. I'm curious to think what Robbie thinks about this argument.
It's always going to be Mario. It just is. Not just from a player standpoint, but all the off the ice stuff as well. You have to include that. You can't just ignore that. But what Mario did scoring wise, unless Crosby, even if Crosby catches Mario in terms of goals, assists, points, Mario did it in under 1,000 games. It's not even. Again, era is different. I understand that, But as Garrett said, what Mario did on the ice it made no sense whatsoever. Crosby's smaller, like his work in the corners, like it's fantastic, and you'll never see that at that level again. But it's much easier to navigate a ice surface as a 5'11", 6-foot guy rather than Mario coming in at 6'4", 6'5", and just being the best player on the ice. Like he didn't even have to have his best game and be the best player on the ice, just because everything just was so simple.
Again, just to put a bow on this as we move to question 10, like Snail said, every person can bring something different to this argument, and we can argue about it, and we'll probably continue to argue about it after Crosby and Malkin and Letang and all of them have retired and we move on into the next era of Penguins hockey. But I love that we're still having conversations like this in 2023, and that's just the fun part of being a sports fan. Question 10, as we continue some of the generational talk. Question 10 comes from Brian. This is for Robbie. I can't really think of any other team that has had two pairs of generational talents playing for their organization, likely meaning Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr and Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Robbie, can you think of any other examples, past or present, that this criteria may apply to?
Yeah, two at the same time is incredibly rare. You can look back to when there was just 6 teams in the NHL, just because the talent pool was so concentrated that you had generational players playing on multiple teams at the same time, just because of there wasn't enough teams to spread all that talent out. Whereas now, with 32 teams in the league, you're not going to get, very rarely you're going to get another Malkin and Crosby or another Malkin and Jagr. I guess you could say Edmonton having McDavid and Draisaitl are about as close as it comes to generational right now. Bergeron and Chara to a point, just because, they're both Hall of Famers, I guess, would be kind of in that conversation. But, the closest you're going to get to a Malkin and Crosby is probably a McDavid and Draisaitl type situation. But again, with with a hard salary cap, that's going to become very rare and very hard to do. But yeah, that's probably the closest you can get. I don't think you're going to see, it's going to be rare if you see it much more often going into the future.
What about I guess they're not really a team, they're not really there anymore, but would you have argued that maybe that Blackhawks team had generational talent on it? Like,
I'm not the Jonathan Taves parade leader. I don't think he was ever as good as what he, outside of maybe a 3 or 4 year window, was never as good as what the NHL media wanted to make him seem to be. But I almost think that Duncan Keith was probably,
that's who I was going to say was more of the generational defenseman. I think he won a Norris, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. I think it's more Keith and Kane. They'll never be brought up like that. Like, the NHL media is so far up Jonathan Taves' jock that it's a joke that Taves was on that NHL 100 list over Evgeny Malkin.
Absolutely.
Oh, so dumb.
But again, they were the pretty boys of the NHL for years. So, but no, it was more of a Keith Kane situation to me, more than Taves and Kane. But yeah, those are two. Keith and Kane are definitely Hall of Famers in the future as well. So yeah, another good pairing there as well to talk about. Question number 11 for Snail. Garrett missed a prime opportunity to get back at Robbie, saying Mr. Poopy Pants, from eating his steak too raw before he told us Robbie had the flu. Go get those chirps in when the opportunity arises. And for the record, I had COVID, not the flu.
So at the time we thought Robbie had the flu. And I think Garrett extracted his chunk of flesh, his pound of flesh.
We don't even know. I mean, and we don't have to, further elaborate. We don't even know if Robbie was pooping his brains out. That may not have even been a side effect of if he was dealing with COVID. I don't even remember like diarrhea being a major symptom of COVID anyway.
I mean,
No.
I don't think. I think it's more the respiratory issues than anything.
Yeah, the really like life-threatening stuff. It's everything solid on your end over there, Robbie?
Yeah, I'm sure everything's
Yeah, I mean, we can stop the conversation there, but yeah, we're good.
Yeah. Okay. So when we were coming on, I was actually we were talking about how Robbie's doing or whatever, and I was trying to poke and prod to see what was going on there, what kind of symptoms he was dealing with. No talk of the we don't need to get too much into it, but there was no talk of any sort of diarrhea or poop in the draws. So we'll move on from that. But Garrett got his chirps in, a little bit. We're just glad Robbie's healthy, and when we heard it was COVID, that's
At least I have a camera.
okay.
Yeah, there we go.
If you want to take a shot at me, my face cam not working, then I don't have a snappy comeback for you because I've never been insulted like that before.
Okay.
All right, before they put boxing gloves on, let's move on here to question number 12, and it's for Garrett. And Brian asks, do any of you boys watch Shoresy? I started it, and so far, Brian's loving it. It's so hockey. The chirps are good.
Snail, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like this question should have gone to you. Didn't you put in our group chat? You put in our group chat a couple of weeks or months ago about this show. I have yet to watch it. I'm pretty sure you said you were watching it at one point, weren't you?
Yeah, so I don't know if either of you guys have watched it, but Letterkenny was huge. It's an awesome TV show directed by Jared Kiso, and they've got some hockey characters in this show, Letterkenny. It's just have you guys seen Letterkenny, either of you?
I've seen clips.
I have
You've
not.
seen clips. So you're somewhat familiar. It's just a very Canadian TV show.
Yeah.
And then they made a spin-off, I believe after like 10 or maybe 11 seasons. I could be wrong on the number of seasons, but Letterkenny's coming to an end. But Jared Kiso has created a spin-off based on the hockey players in the show Letterkenny, and it's called Shoresy. And Shoresy is a character. He's a hockey player on the local hockey team. And they have 2 seasons now. They've gotten renewed for a third. The first season came out a couple of years ago, and then they just dropped the second season when I probably mentioned it in the group chat because I was watching it. They're pretty short and sweet episodes. They're not super deep either. I think one thing that show really brings to the table is the dialogue. It's not. Jared Kiso has truly a way with words. Like I think that it's like Brian said, it's hilarious. The chirps are hilarious. Just the way that they banter in the show is so much different than any of the, The Office or the like Parks and Recs or whatever that we have down here. Even like a show like what's the other Canadian one that everyone watches? Trailer Park Boys.
Yeah.
It's just very unique. It's very different. The hockey one it's truly made for hockey fans. I think they're the first like true hockey TV show or comedy there's ever been where they're actually hockey fans could really relate and everything's pretty accurate. I recommend it. Brian recommends it. I think if you guys, the holidays are coming up with the World Juniors, there's something to watch, but I would recommend to anyone listening who hasn't watched it, and to Garrett and Robbie, you guys should check out Shoresy season 1 and then eventually move on to season 2. You could watch the whole thing in a couple of hours just on your couch, like a whole season. It's an awesome show, but I would recommend it to both you, any and everyone.
Alrighty. With that, we will move on to question 13, going back to Robbie here. If Rickard Rakell comes back and plays well on Sid's line and starts finally, hopefully, maybe potting some goals, would you want to keep him there when Brian Rust eventually comes off injured reserve? Rusty is the more versatile of the two and could help with some of the depth issues.
I mean, I'm up for whatever gets Rickard Rakell going this year, and if he comes back and there's some chemistry with Sid and the goals start going in, then yeah, you keep him there until the wheels fall off. Basically, at that point, is what's not broke, don't fix it. Russ has shown chemistry with Malkin in the past, so that would not be the worst thing in the world to drop him down to that line. But if Rakell comes back and working with Sid and the goals are coming, with the way scoring is right now with the Penguins, then yeah, you keep that tandem together with Gensel, and just hope that that scoring keeps up going forward. Because I mean, you just need to do anything to get him going, and if it means sacrificing Brian Rust to the second line, then you do it. Don't think twice about it. Just keep penciling Raquel next to Crosby every night. Question 14 for Snail from Brian. Which player has the best jersey collection, meaning jerseys of teams he's played for? Brian says Patrick Kane, playing for 3 original 6 teams, has to be tough to beat.
I think that would be my answer, is Patty Kane. I think it says something when a player has not moved around a ton in their career, especially with the type of career a guy like Patrick Kane has had. I think teams at points in his career would have moved heaven and earth if they knew that he was available. But another thing that Patrick Kane said that I think is also maybe overlooked, and it'd be important to me, not only as a fan, but if I was a player, which I never will be, but like if I was a player, this resonated with me. And he said he wanted to play somewhere where hockey is important to the community. And I think, I mean, I love that. I think that if you're playing, I think that just brings the best out of a player, like a guy like Patrick Kane. Original 6 teams tend to have those hockey hungry fan bases. I love it. I think another guy I was kind of thinking of is I like Phil Kessel. Kind of has a little bit of that. He has a couple original 6 teams. He drafted by Boston originally, played for the Leafs, lit it up for the Leafs, and was extremely underappreciated. People hated his attitude. He was considered the coach killer. And then he comes to Pittsburgh and wins 2 cups, and then you see his jersey collection from there just kind of goes from competitive hockey hungry cities to where the golf's good, and that's Arizona and Vegas. And the more the off ice stuff is a little bit more important, the money, the style of living. His jerseys truly tell a story of a great American born hockey player. So Patty Kane and Phil Kessel would just be my honorable mention there. All right, question number 15. I guess this one's kind of for me here. Brian asks, what is Climate Pledge Arena like? It's definitely on my bucket list of arenas to watch a game at. Just the concept of it is so cool, although the arena name is kind of tough, just bad. If you have been, can you notice that you're underground? So yeah, I don't know how much either of you two know about Climate Pledge. Climate Pledge Arena, the name, I've heard that people think it's bad. I don't really hate it because I think Climate Pledge is literally like a pledge from like Bezos and his cronies at Amazon to make things as green as possible. And it makes sense because I think the arena, I could be wrong on this, I probably should Google this really quick, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it, that if it's not completely carbon neutral in the moment right now, it has a pledge to be climate or to be carbon neutral in the not so distant future. So it actually makes sense if you kind of know the leading up to and the message behind how the stadium was. I'm not going to say built, because it was actually reconstructed. It used to be the Key Arena where the Seattle Supersonics used to play when we had the NBA team here. And a lot of people say that the Seattle Thunderbirds, the WHL team, played there. But if you actually went to games, you'd know that that's not where the games were played. They were played right next door at the Coliseum, which is now like a ballet center. So for people that say it's where the Thunderbirds played, they're wrong. But it's a really interesting arena. It has some really interesting character, and that what he's talking about is being underground or whatever. It is built mostly underground. So if you walk in the main entrances to the arena, you're actually already up pretty high, and the ice is many sections below you. So when you're sitting in your seats and you're looking out the kind of the windows behind you, once you maybe move away from your seats and you look out, because there's a lot of windows. If you look out, you're actually like you'll be pretty high up in the stands, but you look back and you're actually like at street level. And I think it is pretty unique. It's pretty interesting. It's a great barn, dude. Like, it's got, I think, I don't want to call it like a junior barn, but it's a little bit intimate. It's really right on top of the ice. Maybe not so much like some of the more old school rinks, but it does have kind of this, I could imagine being a player. It's probably a tough barn to play in. It gets rowdy in there. I think a lot of the fans in Seattle, they're learning hockey. They're getting more invested in their team, but they're hooting and hollering about. Yeah, and sometimes I wonder if they know what's really going on the ice. Sometimes, like my buddy was just at a game and he was complaining about it. A lot of oohs and ahs from kind of nothing burgers, but it's an awesome place. I'm hoping to at least get a couple games in this season. I've gotten one in so far. I went and saw the Kraken play the Rangers, but it's always a fun time. It's in a great part of town too. I think that's something that is maybe overlooked. Like sometimes you hear teams that don't have their barns in a good part of town, you hear about it a lot. Like you hear about Ottawa, Arizona I don't know if it's been 2 locations now, but when it's in a tough part of town, it kind of dampens the whole experience getting to and from games. Fortunately for the Key Arena, it's not where the Mariners and the Seahawks play. That's actually in Chinatown where they play. It's south of Seattle a little bit. This is right next to the Space Needle. Really good public transportation, right off the freeway, right off another major highway. Easy to and from. It's awesome. So I would recommend, again, like if you guys ever had a chance, or Brian, if you're ever on the West Coast, you will not be disappointed by the experience going on at Climate Pledge.
That is a resounding endorsement from our Pacific Northwesterner on climate. It really is, though. I really do. I remember when they were repurposing the arena, and I was looking into all of the climate-friendly things that they wanted to implement there, which I applaud them for. I think it's a great thing to limit the impact on the environment, and Seattle often being looked at as a forward-thinking, progressive city with all it has to do with technology and climate and all that. So I think all of that is fantastic.
Yep, you could get off of the carbon neutral electric public transit, hop on a Lime bike or a Lime scooter, and e-bike or scooter yourself to a carbon neutral arena to watch a hockey game. And they actually have a ton of vegan food in there too. They've got Impossible Meats, the vegan meat company. They actually have like a kiosk as well as like a restaurant in there. So
that's right up your alley.
Oh yeah. Very green, very liberal, very Seattle.
Well, fellas, 15 questions in, 15 questions out, but that was only part 1. Part 2 will be coming at you later in the week, but until then, for Snail, for Robbie, I have been Garrett Bahana. Thank you so much for listening to another edition of the Skating Penguin Network Mailbag, and we will talk to all of you again very soon.